Well, good morning. Good to have you all here on this Sunday morning. I hear you mumbling out there. I know the feeling. It's a little bit slow to get started, and the cafeteria hasn't opened yet. So if you feel the need to leave, Tom, I won't take it personally. But I am here to speak about Dutch purple cows this morning. You had to be there. Anyway, all right. So I want to speak this morning about in some ways sort of a technical topic as well as a philosophical one, and that concerns the question of streaming, why stream, or what is the purpose for streaming, or perhaps even a little bit how to go about streaming, although I'm not going to get too far into the technical aspects of it. There are other places for that. But one of the things that has struck me in the last couple of years about social media, the internet, the web, so forth, is some of the terminology that's used. First of all, for example, I went to a lecture with, Billy took us to a lecture the other night where a professor was speaking about social media and how some of the concepts in social media are prevalent. And one of them is the idea of sharing. That's a concept that's very pervasive in social media today. Similar to that is the idea of having followers or friends. One of the games that I enjoy playing on Facebook is, it is on Facebook, but just on the web in general, is a game called Words with Friends. And it's kind of an interesting concept, words with friends. It's not just words or Scrabble, which is really what it's like, but it's with friends. That's an interesting concept to me. Also, just the prevalence of natural world sort of ideas. Tweets, which is something birds do. Streams, clouds, other natural phenomena. It's kind of an interesting concept when you think about it. So, words with friends. I don't know how well you can see that. It doesn't really matter what the words are so much, or even what the score is. But this is a picture of what the Words with Friends interface looks like. It's a Scrabble game board. And I don't remember who won this particular game. It is actually between me and someone else. But what's interesting about it is, as I've mentioned, it's called Words with Friends. Now, it's kind of a misnomer because in some cases, the people I play Words with Friends with are not my friends. I mean, they're people I know or I'm casually acquainted. But if you don't have any friends, you can actually ask Words with Friends to give you friends. And it will randomly assign you a person to play. So it will give you friends. It's kind of an interesting idea. In this case, I was actually playing with a young lady by the name of Amanda. Now, Amanda is actually a former student of mine from some 20 years ago. And she and I had become friends on Facebook, again, reconnected. And she invited me to play Words with Friends. So now we're friends on Words with Friends. Now, there's another kind of interesting idea to that as well. In America, at least, we have an expression, at least that used to be a fairly common one, that if you got in an argument with someone, you had words with them. So it has that kind of a connotation. It could have that kind of a connotation as well. As you kind of get at cross purposes with each other, you have words with someone. You have words with your friends. And playing the game, sometimes it does get that way. You can get in arguments and so forth. So who am I? Kirsten mentioned a little bit already, and I've covered some of this already, but my title is actually officially Pastor for Web Ministries, and that's at the Forest Lake Church in near Orlando, Apopka, Orlando, Florida. My education is both Adventist and non-Adventist. I've been educated in the Adventist system as well as in the non-Adventist systems. So I've kind of worked my way around in education. This is my fourth career in my life. The fourth one, which combines my first one and parts of my third one. This is kind of interesting. I have 0 children. Get asked that every so often. How many children do you have? My wife and I standard response is, none that we know of. All right? And we like to keep it that way. All right. And hobbies, just in case you're interested, because after all, this is Words with Friends. I have numerous hobbies. Currently, right now, I'm spending a fair bit of time cycling, road cycling. I have myself a nice carbon frame bike, etc. And photography is another one. I won't discuss Canon versus Nikon, but anyway, I have the better of the two. I'll let you figure out which that is. See how that works? All right, and then back to this question, who are you? Who are you? You might answer that question in a variety of ways, right? You would show me your name badge. Here's who I am. You might point to a spouse, your children. I'm the parent of these children, or I'm married to this person, or whatever it might be. You might say, I'm the child of so-and-so. You might tell me your job, give me your title, what your responsibilities are. In a church context, you might say, well, this is what I do in church, or within the Adventist context. Here's who I am. Who are you? I think that's an important question to ask as well when you come to the idea of streaming. Who are you as a congregation? Who are you as a group of people who gather together? Why is it that you want to stream? We'll get to that. Back again to this question about words with friends, though. This, I think, is an excellent metaphor, illustration of streaming. When you are streaming a church service, whatever it might be, funeral, worship service, whatever event, classroom discussion, whatever it is you're streaming, you are having words with friends, or at least I hope so. Maybe to start with, they may only be words, but eventually, I think, the purpose should be to have words with friends. And not the words with friends kind of contentious sort of thing or fight sort of thing, but actually friends, the things that friends share with one another. To me, this is what streaming should accomplish. We'll get to more of that in a minute. So I have some questions for you. First of all, why use technology? Well, for one thing, it's no longer the exception, but it's really become the expectation that you're going to be incorporating some sort of technology, current technology. All of you are using other technology in your church right now. If you have anything printed, if you have electricity, that's technology. It has been around for a while, printing for quite a while. That's technology. You're using it already. But the expectation is becoming now that you're going to be using other types of technology, the internet, streaming, video, audio, so forth. Another reason why to consider technology is the internet right now has very few boundaries. There are countries that try to create boundaries for the internet, and they're not very successful. So it's pretty much everywhere. It's pervasive. It's also the current paradigm. Just as printing was once the paradigm for communicating, we heard a little bit in our worship this morning about how pervasive printing came. People were killed for printing. People could have been killed for printing, for taking in books, so forth. But nowadays, it's why would you go through the effort of smuggling in a book when you could just upload it to Dropbox? When you could just send them the PDF, assuming, of course, that the internet isn't entirely blocked. Or maybe just put it on a thumb drive and carry it in. A lot easier smuggling these days, Maybe they could have embedded a chip under your arm and then taken it out on the other end, right? That would have been good, yeah. All right, so what sort of technology? Well, we're talking about streaming, but I would argue that you need to use whichever technology is available to you. All right, whatever that is. Maybe streaming isn't available to you. Maybe you can't afford it. That's fine. Not everyone should be streaming. Let me make that clear. I don't believe that every congregation should be streaming. And there's reasons for that, I think. But I don't believe you should be streaming just because it's available. There should be some reasons why you're doing it. We're going to get to that in a minute. Whatever you can afford is what you should do. Again, not everyone can afford various forms of technology. That's fine. Doesn't mean you're ineffective, but maybe it's just not available to you right now. Or perhaps it's whatever God has called you to do. And maybe you can't afford it right now, but God is still calling you to do something. Fine, He'll provide the way. That'll become available to you. So the who of technology. Who is it that is your focus? I would argue that your focus should first of all be your local members. Not in contradiction to the devotional thought that we have, because I have some other points as well. But I believe that it should be of value to your local congregation, your local members. Secondly, it should be of value to your local community, so that it isn't just something that's inward focused, but something that allows you to focus outward. And finally, I believe it's of particular value to youth and young adults. It's the paradigm in which they are currently communicating. If you intend to be able to communicate as well, or for the young adults within your congregation to be able to communicate, you should be using it. So let me go through some details. Some of this is repetition. I'm going to skip through it as I move along. But there are some details. First of all, we've had this discussion already, and maybe we need to have it some more, but there's this ongoing discussion about wireless access in the church. I believe you should use wireless in your church. That's my perspective. We can discuss that, disagree as you like. But there's some reasons for it. One is YouVersion, something I mentioned on Friday. A YouVersion app is an excellent way to incorporate and have a reason to have wireless access within your church. Another is to focus on doing audio and video recording. Many churches were set up for audio because they already have a sound system, so it's a matter of plugging in a deck to the soundboard and being able to record. That's straightforward. But if you're doing anything in the way of video, if you're streaming it, you should be archiving it. That is to make it available for download. And there's ways to accomplish that. Also, and I'm going to hit this again, although it got me some attention, and I will go with that. PowerPoint versus ProPresenter. I still believe that PowerPoint must die. Sorry. And Sabbath, that became a discussion point for those who have been married to PowerPoint and Keynote. And that's okay. I didn't say that PowerPoint wasn't good. I just said that it wasn't the best for worship. Okay? There's a difference. There's a difference. I'm talking about worship. If you as a pastor, you as a presenter, you as an elder in your church, you as someone who wants to present something, sure, fine. Keynote, PowerPoint, great. You're the one that's spending all the time in it. But if you want to make something effective in a graphic way in a worship service, use something more than a static, linear presentation software. There's a workshop on ProPresenter here later on. I'll let that person sell you yet again on why that should be good. Streaming. As I mentioned already, streaming is optional. Not every congregation needs to stream. Not every congregation should be streaming. Social media. Now, here's something that I haven't heard yet about social media too much this weekend, and that is this. Social media is already talking about you. Are you going to be part of that conversation? Whether you are using it or not, it is already being used about you. There are already people who are speaking about, talking about, posting, tweeting, all of those things, using social media, and they're talking about you. They're talking about your congregation. They're talking about whatever. They're talking about you as a neighbor. They're talking about you as a church, you as a denomination. They're already being talked about. And this is what's kind of baffling to me as the church, the Adventist church, I've been a part of some discussions about social media in the North American context. Should we use it? How should we use it? Why should we use it? What if we're afraid of it? So forth. And I'm like, it's already being used about you. So do you want to be a part of that conversation, or do you want to just let that conversation continue on without you? Well, you can, but it's happening. And then, of course, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, ways of using social media. Another concept, another idea, another detail that I think is important when you consider the question of streaming, and that is this. You need to be continually, constantly training if you're going to be involved in streaming. It's not something that you do once, and then you've got your team of people together, and you're done. Streaming is something, like as with many technologies, you should constantly be training to replace yourself and involve others in that process, or else the vision is going to die out. I've been in more than one congregation where, in my days as a pastor, where we couldn't start church because one person wasn't there. Ever in that experience? Ever had that experience? I have. We couldn't start church because the one person who had the keys to the soundboard and was authorized to use it wasn't there. So we sat and waited for one person to be able to have church. We could have been several hundred, but one person had held it up. Why was that? Because no one had trained anyone else. No one had authorized or trusted, really, anyone else. And this one person, sadly to say it's usually the sound guy, but no, nothing personal. One person, a deacon, whoever it might be, has somehow been able to corner the market for that particular aspect of the worship service. And now you can't do anything. We have to wait. It shouldn't really be that way. You should always have other people who are involved and constantly be training and replacing yourself. Because the idea is that you want to build for the future, not for the present. You're building for the future and not the present. So, to the question again. But yes, Why should I stream? Well, first of all, I believe that streaming should be used as a means, a method for communicating the gospel. But let's stop there. Many congregations think it has other purposes, but I believe the first thing that should be done is that streaming should be used to communicate the gospel. Not to communicate truth or concepts or doctrines, not as just a kind of a we have in America the expression, fly on the wall view of what's going on in your church, just sort of some sort of removed little webcam in a corner somewhere where we can all kind of spy on what they're doing in church today. But it should be used to communicate the gospel. That should be your primary focus. It also is a way to extend your congregation to members who can't be there, as well as non-members. In fact, I find that streaming is a way that is safe. It's a safe way for someone to attend remotely. I mean, think about it. If you were to buy a car, a truck, whatever it is, you wouldn't walk into the dealership and say, yes, I'd like that one right there. Thank you. Let's go. You would at least say, I think I'd like to drive it first. I could take it out, maybe I'll go to another dealership, try another model, a different one, talk a little bit, negotiate a little bit, whatever. But you're not typically going to walk into a dealership, buy the first thing you see, and then just go. You want to try it out. You want to check it out. Maybe, that commercial looked great, but that car doesn't fit so well. Or whatever. It's a little slower than I thought. Whatever it is, it's just your rationale. And why is that? Because you've tried it out first. Many people are intimidated to actually come into a church building. And it is an intimidating experience. Typically, the place is maybe not that large. The people inside know each other, but you don't as a visitor. You're not really sure. Maybe if you haven't been to church much in your life, you're not sure what goes on there, what to expect. Being able to attend online, being able to watch a church, to visit a church remotely via streaming, gives a safe way for someone to attend, to be a part of it. But let me stop there and point this out. If you're going to stream, there's some questions you need to ask yourself. Who are you as a congregation? What is it that you want to accomplish? And why do you want to accomplish it? For some reason, streaming has sort of become a fad. So like, we all have to be on, we have to be on the web, we have to stream. Well, okay, fine. But there are certain things you need to consider when you begin that journey. One is, it's going to cost a lot of money. That's often an issue. Another is, you are allowing people that you can't see to be a part of your congregation. So think of it this way. If we were to take this building here, remove all the curtains, the walls, the roofs, and everything, and replace it with one-way mirrors where people could see in, but we couldn't see them. That's what it's like to stream. Right now, I have no idea who's on the other side of the camera. I don't know how many, don't know where they're at, don't know what they look like, but they know many things about me right now. What I look like, I've talked about where I'm from, many different bits of information. The camera is moving around and it's looking at your faces, but you have no idea who is out there. So think about that. Is that what you want for your congregation? I'm not saying it should be scary, but that is what the dynamic is. Are you willing to open up your church, not just the building, but the community of people? Because really what you're doing in church is you're worshiping together. You're communicating with each other. Do you want people viewing from the outside to have that camera swing around and see people sleeping? They're going to. It is, huh? You can see everything. Do you want people viewing from the outside to see you up front pounding on a pulpit saying derogatory things, demeaning things about particular whatever? Ethnicities, denominations, whatever. Is that what you want to communicate? Within a building, you might assume, okay, look, I know there's this many people here. I know all these people. I can say certain things. When you're streaming, you don't know who is out there. You don't know who's watching, where they're from, what their mindset is. It's a one-way mirror looking in. That's something to think about. Remember, you're also archiving that, hopefully. Again, those messages can sit, when you archive something, it's there. I mean, you can pull it down later, but you don't know who's downloaded it. You can't get it back. Many a young person has discovered to their dismay that the fun photos they took while they were out on a college excursion on a holiday somewhere and had too much to drink and posted shots of their fun, then later down the road went to an employer and wanted to be hired. And the employer did a search on their name and found their Facebook page and said, oh, this is interesting. Okay, so you say that you're responsible, on time, respectful, and I see this? I think we're going to pass. It's the same when you're streaming. Do you want them to see everything? They're going to. Do you have something that you think would be appealing to people as well? What are you doing? What are you trying to communicate? Is it a safe place for others? Another part of streaming is that it changes the dynamic. It should change the dynamic of how your worship service goes. It should. Because you've now introduced a different element. When you start streaming, you've introduced the element of time into your worship service. And for many congregations, depending on culture perhaps, but it doesn't matter, time is an interesting concept when it comes to worship. Because, again, when we're all in the same building, we start when we all get here. Today we started a little later. Does that matter? Well, if I was planning to, and I'd gotten up at, in a different time zone, maybe someone back in the States, friend of mine says, I want to see you speak. When are you speaking? I'm speaking at 9. And they do the translation in their heads, and they get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to watch me to speak. Well, we didn't start until 9:30. They're like, I got up, I could have slept another half an hour. Because why? Because we didn't start on time. Why does that matter? Because we're streaming. Many congregations need to consider that if they're going to stream. You say your service starts at 9, your service needs to start at 9. If you say you're going to preach for half an hour, preach for half an hour. If you say that something is going to happen, make it happen that way. Many congregations struggle with that. And I understand, I know that, culturally and so forth, we like that flow, we like to be able to go with the Spirit, we like to be able to move as we see fit. Great. But your audience doesn't know that online. Many times an online audience will be like, why, these people said they were starting at 9, they don't even bother turning the camera on until 9:45. Why is that? Well, I move on. So you have to consider the concept of time. And then also you owe it yourself to understand what it is to broadcast about things like dead airspace, motion, movement. With a camera, it isolates in on an individual. So now what you may think is your normal facial expressions become exaggerated. And that little smile, that little smirk, that little frown becomes very big because it's all there is on the screen. And then there's the congregation. You need to inform them. You need to warn them that you are streaming. Your director will hopefully be smart enough to, or be able to in some cases, not always, be able to cut away from a shot of someone who is scratching their nose, inside their nose, falling asleep, squabbling with the kids, elbowing someone, different things like this. After a while, people forget. And as having sat on the other side of the camera many times, that's why I have a second shot available. Because I'm like, that person's fading off, I can see it. Poop, camera 2. Because it's different when you're streaming. And you have a different dynamic. No, you can't have it perfectly. Congregations will do what they do. People will do what they do. And I'm not saying everybody has to sit stiffly and, never blink and never move, never do anything. But the point is, they are now online and being viewed live. And remember that, you are live. Whatever you say has already gone out by the time you realize you said the wrong thing. So you're live. So what are you doing to provide a safe environment for people who are joining you online? What are you doing to provide a professional, high-standard experience for those who are watching you online? What are you doing to communicate to an outside audience? When I first started attending the Forest Lake Church a number of years ago, now about 8, I attended, first of all, as an online person. I was working in the IT industry. I'd moved into the area recently. I was unable, because of the situation with my in-laws who lived with us, their health was poor. We were unable to go physically to the church, so we attended online from home. And I noticed something right away. The church, which thought it was very, Forest Lake Church, big church, been streaming for a number of years. They're quite proud of that fact. In between each service, they run a PowerPoint or keynote, whichever it is, of slides that are announcements. We call them the commercials. And it just kind of cycles through, this is happening at this time, and this is happening at that place. And one of the slides that was up, one of the commercials that was running, was talking about an event, such and such a date, such and such a time in the UIC. That's what it said. 6 o'clock in the UIC. What's a UIC? I'm watching online. I don't know what a UIC is. I found out later it's the Upper Youth Center, but I couldn't find out because there wasn't even a phone number. How do I contact the church? How do I sign up for this event? How do I respond to this particular item? I don't know. I had to go on Google, had to find the church website, had to drill down through the church directory, maybe take a guess at which pastor I might call, or maybe just the front office, what their hours were, all these sorts of things. And finally I figured out what a number was, called during the right time, and asked them, what in the world is the UIC? I'm like, oh, it's the Upper Youth Center. I said, yeah, but I don't attend in the building. I attend online. Oh, yeah, that's right. There's people watching. There's people watching. Yeah, and they don't know what the UIC is. And they don't know when it says call the church office. What call the church office is. What's the number? What are the hours? How do I find out? You're talking to an outside world. What are you saying to them? Do they understand what you're saying? You see, to me, streaming is having words. And hopefully, it will become words with friends. Thank you.